All right. Thank you, Stacy. And thank you, JBC, for having me back again for a third year, actually. I really appreciate actually talking to the youth. And it sounds a little cliche, but you are our future. So don't mess it up. Okay, so in the past couple of years, what I spoke about actually is the opportunities in tech and why you should forge a career in what I think is the most exciting industry. So I thought I would change it up this year. And instead, I'm going to talk more broadly about work and your careers. Raise your hand if you've heard the term, it's hard to see you, but raise your hand if you've heard the term, the future of work. Almost nobody. Good. Because it's an old term now. The future of work, of education, of life, it's upon us now. And if we wait for some future to come before we change our ways, then we're already going to be behind the times. And so let me walk you through what I see as this evolution that's coming, upon us. Have a look at the screen. This is what I call the beginning of work. This is when life probably sucked, but it was presumably fairly straightforward. Kill, gather, make fire, make shelter, make babies. Work and life were synonymous. Now you fast forward a few 100 million years and a couple of industrial revolutions, and I call this a legacy of work and a low point of work. It's a legacy of work because what helped organizations win in this time is not what's going to help organizations win today. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we're still teaching these legacy practices. It's the low point of work because, in my opinion, in this pursuit of shareholder value and in titles and in wages and all these other comforts, we started to live to work. And that came at the expense of what? Our faith, our family, our friends. I can tell you that there are very few people, if any, who lay on their deathbed and say, I wish I worked more. I wish I made more money. And so then, even though we need to globalize the economies in this world, intuitively, many of us, or maybe not me, but many people intuitively knew that a correction had to occur. So about a decade ago, we started to talk about this future of work. And CEOs around the world now are all of a sudden worried about what? Innovation, automation, the loss of jobs, and these pesky entitled millennials. And the future of work was actually something that was a little bit scary for many organizations. And so the first thing I'm going to say to you is that the future is now, and it's not that scary. Yell out anything that you see in this image of the now work that stands out. Anyone see something obvious about this picture? Sorry? Blue? Is that your favorite color? It's a girl. Number one, she's female. Why? We have gender equality issues that we need to solve now. But she's also a symbol for all underrepresented groups, whether you are an immigrant, whether you have disabilities, maybe you don't have the same financial resources than others. She represents this changing world of equality and democratization. What else? Look at how she's dressed, pretty casually. You see the digital, the technology that she has, the mobile devices, and also if you see on her back is a backpack. Why? Because this now of work is where work and life are becoming one again. And so I don't have time to tell you what these modern companies look like today, although I can say Traction on Demand and Clio that are speaking are the absolute epitome of what modern companies look like. What I will tell you is why is the now of work today or the future of work today, and why wasn't it, say, 5 or 10 years ago? There were 3 main forces you guys all have to know about that's fundamentally changing our world. It's a connected generation, technology, and a sharing economy. I'm going to walk through all 3 quickly. By 2020, that's like a year from now, in North America, half of the working population are going to be millennials. And by 2025, that number could be up to 70%. But you know what? We've been talking about and poo-pooing on millennials for way too long. Guess what? Gen Z, the centennials, and you're part of this generation, by the way, are starting to enter the workforce. And so when you combine them and the young Gen Xers who want a life and world and workplace that's closer to what millennials have co-designed than what some baby boomers are trying to hold on to, this is what I call the connected generation. And by 2020, in the next few years, we could see upwards of 70% of the workforce being in this cohort. And by 2025, that number could be 80 to 85%. So you cannot ignore them. And by the way, if anyone thought generations and stuff, I dispel this notion that generations are actually very different from each other. It's just the world around us has changed. So when you hear I hear a lot of certain generations say the millennials were entitled and they have all the luxuries in life and they're lazy. Well, that's interesting. What did your parents say to you? You were lazy. We had life harder. What did your grandparents say to your parents? The same narrative, years and decades, generations over generations. So the generations actually haven't changed too much. So that's your first force. The second thing is technology. My view is that every company is a tech company. Why? Because either you're building software or hardware, or you're going to be innovated, disrupted, or be made redundant by technology, and it's faster than most companies believe. Every career choice that you guys are thinking of are going to be highly influenced by technology. And so this whole event is anchored on tech. So I'm not going to go through all these exciting things that are happening. You're going to learn about them, but technology you cannot avoid. And then the third force is the sharing economy. So I think most of you probably know that left side. This is the sharing of goods and services, the Ubers, the Airbnbs of the world. In the middle, we have the redistribution of products, things like Kijiji, Craigslist, Oodles. But focus on this right side. This is the sharing of knowledge and information and skills. We're going down a world where you can learn almost anything online, in some cases for free. YouTube, Udemy, Coursera, lynda.com. This is all about a term you might want to get familiar with around democratization, where we're trying to bring education and health and water and other things to people that normally didn't have that. The sharing economy with learning is also about saying, how do we work? Freelancers, the gig economy. You guys hear about intellectual property and how companies held on to that before? Well, you're going to start getting used to a term called open source, when we're starting to share more things versus having to hold on to IP. This is all sharing economy. And let me give you a quick little story. I was thinking about when I was back to your age, so maybe I was a little bit younger, but Greg, you're going to probably remember this. In the 80s, we didn't have the internet. We relied on news and print media to know what was happening around the world. So in the 80s, we started to learn about famine in Ethiopia. And all of a sudden, we were broadcast with these pictures and images of these poor people that were starving. And so the greatest artists in the world, we're talking the singers, the songwriters, the musicians, the bands, the top whatever it was, 50 in the world, got together and wrote a song. They wrote a song, they sold albums, they did concerts, did all these fundraisings. They raised $24 million that year, about 36 million today's dollars. Today, an average person like me or you can leverage social media, use a platform like GoFundMe, and it's proven that we could raise $10 million in a week. GoFundMe, that's only been around for about, 10 years, but 5 years mainstream, has raised over $6 billion in its time for causes that are around the world. And so why does this all matter to you? Oh, did I lose my presentation? Here's why. Why does this all matter to you? Because I'm not convinced the youth of today, that's you, realize the immense opportunities you have in your life. I think many of you actually take for granted the knowledge, the information, the technology that you have before you, and maybe more importantly, the technology you're going to have in the coming decade or so. When you think back, remember I talked about generations not being that different? Every generation before you, I can tell you this, many of us in our teens and early 20s wanted to change the world. But it was freaking hard. We didn't have technologies that could actually solve the problems of the world. We didn't have even a smartphone or the internet. We didn't have the reach of social media or this idea of this sharing economy mindset. And so what happened? We fell into the low point of work where people started to chase the salaries, the titles, etc. You are the first generation in my mind that can truly change the world. And you can do it in your lifetime. And as you start to learn about these emerging technologies, start to think, and you can experience them this afternoon, imagine a world where quantum and IoT and AI, spatial computing, becomes available to the masses. Imagine a world where this generation never loses that innate desire to make the world a better place. And so let me end with this. I believe this myself, that you can change the world. Don't lose sight of that. From global warming to poverty to curing cancer and bringing education and opportunity to everyone in this world. You have the power and the resources that no generation had before. Our future is in tech, and every career or profession you think of is going to be profoundly impacted by tech. So I'll leave you with this. Think passion, think impact, and think tech, and the rest of your careers will unfold naturally. Thank you, and good luck.